Could the entire trajectory of a nation's security, the very fabric of its domestic tranquility, hinge upon a seemingly innocent chalk mark on a lamppost or a carefully placed rock near a drainage culvert? In the tense, shadow-laden decades following the Second World War, when the ideological chasm between East and West yawned into a terrifying abyss, such mundane signals became the lifeblood of a covert struggle waged not on battlefields, but in the quiet, unassuming corners of American cities. This was the Cold War, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, operating under the ever-watchful, often autocratic, eye of J. Edgar Hoover, found itself thrust into the unfamiliar and perilous world of counter-espionage, an invisible war fought with patience, suspicion, and an elaborate playbook of clandestine communication. The landscape of American espionage, particularly in its earliest Cold War iterations, was a labyrinthine maze of whispers and veiled threats. The Bureau, initially conceived as a domestic law enforcement agency, was ill-equipped for the sophisticated game of international intelligence. Yet, as the Iron Curtain descended and the specter of communist infiltration loomed large, the FBI became the primary bulwark against Soviet spy networks operating within the United States. This was a realm where direct contact between a handler and an asset, a recruited spy or defector, was an almost unthinkable risk. Every meeting, every exchange presented a devastating vulnerability, a chance for an opposing surveillance team to identify faces, follow vehicles, and unravel entire networks. The solution, honed through decades of illicit operations by various intelligence agencies across the globe, was the dead drop, an anonymous, pre-arranged location where information could be exchanged without either party ever having to meet or even see one another. Imagine a bustling metropolis in the mid-20th century, Washington, D.C., New York City, or perhaps San Francisco. The streets teemed with everyday life, men in fedoras rushing to offices, women in tailored suits navigating department stores, the clatter of streetcars, the rumble of automobiles. Beneath this veneer of normalcy, the FBI's counterintelligence agents and Soviet intelligence officers engaged in a silent, high-stakes game of cat and mouse. A dead drop was a carefully selected, seemingly innocuous spot, chosen for its blend of obscurity and accessibility, a place where a small package could be left and later retrieved without drawing undue attention. These were not the stuff of cinematic thrillers with elaborate hidden compartments in exotic locales. They were disturbingly prosaic. A hollowed-out tree stump in a suburban park, a loose brick in an old garden wall, the space beneath a public bench, a discarded cigarette pack tucked under a particular lamppost, or even a small container buried shallowly in a patch of dirt next to a bus stop. The brilliance of the dead drop lay in its simplicity and its capacity for deniability. If a package was discovered prematurely, there was no direct link to either the sender or the recipient. It was merely trash, forgotten detritus. Consider an evening in the late 1950s. Special Agent Frank Morrison, a man whose tailored gray suit seemed to blend seamlessly into the urban twilight, sat in his parked, nondescript Ford sedan, its engine idling softly, a half-smoked cigarette smoldering in the ashtray. His gaze, however, was not on the rush-hour traffic, but fixed on a specific public telephone booth across the street. This particular booth, near the entrance of a quiet residential park in Arlington, Virginia, had been identified through intercepted communications and painstaking surveillance as a probable dead drop location for a suspected Soviet GRU agent. The Bureau's intelligence, gleaned from signal intercepts and a meticulously cultivated defector, suggested this agent, known only by his operational alias Vulture, was due to retrieve instructions from a package left by his handler. Morrison's breath fogged the cold glass of the windshield. He had been on surveillance for 6 consecutive hours, the drone of city life, a constant numbing backdrop to his hyper-focused attention. Every passing pedestrian, every car turning the corner, was scrutinized. His partner, Agent Williams, was positioned in another vehicle 3 blocks away, maintaining radio silence, prepared to act as a chase car or backup. The air hung heavy with the smell of exhaust fumes, damp earth, and distant cooking. At precisely 7 o'clock, a man of average height and build, his face obscured by the brim of a dark hat, approached the telephone booth. He paused, feigning interest in the yellow pages, his hand brushing casually against the coin return slot. Morrison's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The man slipped a small, folded piece of paper into his pocket with a movement so fluid and practiced, it was almost imperceptible. He then dropped a nickel into the slot, pretended to make a call, and then smoothly walked away, melting back into the stream of evening commuters. Morrison radioed Williams, a terse, coded message. The pursuit was on. The entire operation had lasted less than 20 seconds. The profound vulnerability of such a brief encounter underscores the necessity of the dead drop. Had Vulture met his handler face to face, the risk of photographic identification, accidental eavesdropping, or even an impromptu arrest would have escalated dramatically. The dead drop mitigated this, transforming a direct interaction into a staged, impersonal exchange of material, reducing the points of contact and thus the chances of compromise for the entire network. The psychological toll on both the agents conducting surveillance and the spies utilizing these methods was immense. For the FBI agents, it was a war of nerves and infinite patience. Hours, days, even weeks could be spent observing a potential drop site, waiting for a single, fleeting moment of activity. The constant vigilance, the inability to relax, the need to notice the infinitesimal details, a shift in a brick, a new stone, an unusual object, created an atmosphere of pervasive tension. For the spies themselves, every trip to a dead drop was fraught with terror. Was it compromised? Was an FBI tail following them? Would the package contain vital intelligence or a trap? One could never be certain. The inherent insecurity of these methods, despite their efficiency, meant that a degree of paranoia was not just a side effect, but an operational necessity. The invisible war played out daily on the streets of America, turning ordinary urban landscapes into battlegrounds of information. While the fundamental concept of the dead drop was universally accepted, researchers and former intelligence officers have, according to some versions, debated the optimal characteristics of such locations. Some theorists argued for high-traffic areas, where the sheer volume of people provided cover, allowing an agent to blend seamlessly into the crowd. Others favored low-traffic, secluded spots, arguing that fewer eyes meant less chance of being accidentally observed, despite the increased risk of a deliberate stakeout. The truth, as suggested by historical accounts and declassified documents, often lay in a pragmatic combination of both, depending on the specific operational requirements, the nature of the information being exchanged, and the perceived level of threat. Ultimately, the choice of a dead drop and the methods used to signal its status reflected a constant adaptation to the ever-evolving tactics of counterintelligence. But how, one might ask, did these disparate silent players truly communicate the readiness of a drop or the need for an urgent pickup without ever uttering a word? The answer lay in an even more intricate dance of signals, a silent language woven into the fabric of everyday life, transforming the mundane into the profoundly significant. The silent language of the Cold War extended far beyond the simple act of leaving a package. It was a complex symphony of subtle cues, a clandestine lexicon understood only by those initiated into its secrets. As the espionage game intensified and surveillance techniques grew more sophisticated, the need for robust signaling mechanisms became paramount. A dead drop was merely the endpoint of a communication chain. The real challenge lay in ensuring that both the sender and the receiver knew when and if to use it. Direct, overt instructions were, by their nature, too risky. Instead, intelligence agencies developed an elaborate system of prearranged signals, transforming ordinary objects and actions into vital operational messages. Imagine for a moment the painstaking process. A Soviet handler, operating under diplomatic cover in Washington, D.C., needed to instruct a recruited American source to retrieve sensitive documents from a dead drop. He could not simply call the source or send a letter. Instead, he might, for example, place a specific book, say, War and Peace, in the window of his embassy apartment, or hang a particular colored towel on a laundry line visible from a certain street. For the American source, driving past the embassy on his way to work, these seemingly innocent domestic actions were a clear, unambiguous signal. The drop is hot, proceed with caution. Conversely, the American source might signal his readiness to leave material by placing a certain object, a flower pot, a specific brand of cereal box, in his own window, or by altering the position of his car's radio antenna when parked in a predetermined spot. These were live signals, visual cues that confirmed the status of an operation or the readiness of a dead drop, executed with the utmost precision and psychological discipline. The very essence of these signaling methods was deniability. If questioned, the Soviet diplomat could simply state he was airing out a book or drying laundry. The American source could claim he was simply leaving a package for a friend or adjusting his car antenna. No overt act of espionage was committed in the open, making it incredibly difficult for the FBI to prove hostile intent, even if they observed the actions. This elaborate dance of plausible explanations was not merely a convenience, it was a foundational pillar of Cold War espionage, designed to protect assets and operations from compromise. The FBI, for its part, understood this game intimately and deployed vast resources to decipher these silent communications, painstakingly logging every change in a window display, every specific car parked in an unusual spot, every chalk mark appearing on a brick wall. Consider the meticulous routine of a bureau surveillance team assigned to a high-priority target, a suspected physicist at a sensitive research facility believed to be passing information to the KGB. For weeks, Special Agents Carter and Davies had maintained a round-the-clock watch on the physicist's suburban home. Their surveillance log, a thick-bound notebook, detailed every mundane action: the time the lights went on and off, the car he drove, the route he took to work, even the color of the curtains in his living room window. One Tuesday morning, Davies, perched in a surveillance van disguised as a utility vehicle, noticed a subtle change. The Venetian blinds in the physicist's study, which were always drawn closed during the day, were now tilted open at a 45-degree angle. This was a deviation from the established pattern. A quick check of their intelligence brief confirmed it. An open blind at a specific angle was a suspected signal indicating a dead drop had been successfully used or was ready for collection. The tension in the van was palpable. Carter, his hand already on the radio, knew this was a critical moment. He dispatched a mobile surveillance unit to the prearranged dead drop location, a hollowed-out section of a split-rail fence in a nearby state park. Simultaneously, another team was tasked with discreetly observing the physicist's movements for the rest of the day, hoping to catch him making a pickup or confirming a successful drop. This was the lifeblood of counterintelligence, identifying the anomalies, understanding their meaning, and reacting with lightning speed while maintaining absolute discretion. The process was relentless, requiring immense patience and the ability to differentiate between genuine signals and random occurrences, a constant psychological battle against confirmation bias and the inherent unpredictability of human behavior. The consequences of failing to decipher these signals, or conversely, of being caught in the act of sending or receiving one, were profound. For the intelligence agency, a compromised signal could mean the loss of a valuable asset, the unraveling of an entire network, or the exposure of critical national security information. For the individual spy, discovery often led to arrest, interrogation, charges of espionage or treason, and decades in a federal penitentiary. The infamous case of Aldrich Ames, a CIA officer who betrayed numerous American agents to the Soviets in the 1980s, vividly illustrates the devastating impact. Many of his contacts were identified and arrested by the KGB through Ames's use of dead drops and carefully observed signals, resulting in their execution. The moral ambiguities for the FBI were also significant. The handling of defectors, the use of double agents, the constant ethical tightrope walk between protecting national security and the very real human cost of these operations. While the FBI and other Western intelligence agencies developed sophisticated methods to identify and exploit these signaling techniques, The sheer number of potential signals and the ingenuity of their adversaries meant that success was never guaranteed. Some researchers examining declassified documents and memoirs of former agents suggest that many of these signals, particularly in the chaotic early years, may have gone entirely unnoticed or been misinterpreted. The sheer volume of noise in the mundane environment made it incredibly difficult to isolate the signal. Other historians argue that the very existence of such intricate systems speaks to a profound level of paranoia and an overestimation of Soviet infiltration, a view consistent with the McCarthy era's heightened anxieties.